on, but I am going to check now to see if we're live. Good evening, everybody. This is Bernie Strom, and I'm here with Beatles Eternally for our Diamonds and Dice baseball podcast for May 31st. We just got our May broadcast in, Beatles. How you doing today?
We did just get it under the wire. You saved us. You saved our metaphorical bacon. Doing very well, Bernie. Thank you, and hopefully the same for you as well.
Everything's going great. Yeah, we try to do one every month, but we seem to let May get away from us. And
Yeah.
when we were on one of your broadcasts a few days ago, we were lucky enough, you were lucky enough to spot that May 31st was a Sunday. So here we are, May 31st.
And Jeff Ray, Jeff is with us already. Jeff Ray.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
Great writer, Jeff. Oh my goodness.
Anyway, the topic today, and I'm going to tell you, I came up with this topic, and I came up with it because of this Red Sox historical tournament I'm doing. Are dead ball teams really that good? And the reason I came up with that is because the dead ball teams keep beating everybody. They win. They've been winning every series they're in. It's amazing. The only time they lose is when they're facing another dead ball team. So I guess my first question to you is going to be, do you think dead ball teams are really that good?
So, I mean, for me, I do think they are. I think one of the difficulties with talking about dead ball baseball is the fact that there's nobody on this planet that's ever seen, right, other than like little snippets of films here, but none of us have ever seen a dead ball game for obvious reasons. You'd have to be like Methuselah. But I think they are. I think that you had, of course, amazing pitching. And I think that also people are under the misconception, a few misconceptions about dead ball. First, that they were low scoring games. That is not necessarily the case. Another one is that there were no sluggers. That is definitely not the case. There were two off the top of my head: Sam Crawford, Hannes Wagner. I do think they were that good. The 1906 Chicago Cubs, still ranked by baseball historians. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm no baseball historian. I mean real historians, as one of the greatest teams of all time in any era. So I think they are.
It's interesting you should say that, because as I looked at, I came up with the question, and although I'm a baseball fan, I am not a baseball historian. I am not a baseball scholar. I'm just a baseball fan. I'm like everybody else. I like watching the games.
Yep.
And I like entertaining games. And of course, a couple of years ago, you introduced me to dead ball, and I fell in love with dead ball baseball. Actually, that's my favorite baseball is dead ball baseball.
Wow.
And I really didn't. I played the 1912 season. I played the 1914. I played all those. 1912 was the first season I played because the 1912 Red Sox were supposedly their best team, so I played that. But then I played 1914 and some of the other seasons where they just missed out. And that's the only experience I really had with dead ball. Of course, I've seen those snippets on YouTube, and I've read the books about dead ball baseball. I think one of the things I like, and has really nothing to do with this title, but I like the characters that played baseball at the turn of the 20th century.
Absolutely.
They were people you could write about in the newspapers. You wanted to hear the stories. They were just fun guys. They were regular guys, and they didn't make any more money than the guy that worked in a factory. They were just one of you guys. They're not like today where they're all millionaires.
No.
They were just regular people. They would have liable to just as easily lived on your block as and been your next door neighbor as live in a gated community like today. Anyway, I don't want to go off the subject of dead ball teams really that good. Anyway, as I start studying and researching this subject so I would have something to say, I came to the conclusion that good has nothing to do with it, that dead ball teams just play a different type of baseball than the modern teams do. Wouldn't you agree with that?
1000%. It was a faster game. Average dead ball game was an hour and a half.
It was such a different game.
Yes.
And for example, they emphasized contact hitting in dead ball baseball. They didn't want to strike out. They wanted to put the ball in play because good things happen when the ball was in play. Always. Nothing good happens from a strikeout. But today, they don't give a shit if they strike out. They
Michael
strike
Silva.
out because they want to hit home runs. Hey, Michael, how you doing? And Jeffrey's here.
Yeah, Jeffrey's here, and Philip Reynolds is here. Hey, Philip.
Anyway, they play contact ball, not swing to hit a 400-foot home run because they make more money when they hit home runs than when they hit singles. The other thing I paid attention to was in dead ball teams, every player on the team could bunt, even the cleanup hitter, even the number 3 hitter, and they would bunt.
Yes. Hey, Jamie. Yes, they would bunt.
I can't tell you in my lifetime, I don't believe I've ever seen a cleanup hitter bunt.
Only time I ever saw it was when I was in an undergraduate. We had like a baseball league, and we'd go to each other's dorm rooms or flats or whatever. And so I was managing a team, and I happened to have Jimmy Fox on the team. And I actually pulled off a suicide squeeze with Jimmy Fox. Now, and I'm like, okay, I've got to go against conventional baseball wisdom. And it worked, but that was actually a silly move. But yeah,
I have my camera on, huh? Well, you can see.
Yeah, you have your camera on, and we can see the 2 avatars. And
well, we don't want to do that. Let me get the camera off. Hold on one second. Thank you, Michael.
Michael says he's disappointed not to see you in your robe. Okay, apparently I'm missing something here. So
I am not in my robe. I'm wearing a baseball jersey. Hey, how do you like that? But you're gonna see it as I turn it off right here. There we go.
Now we've got the infinite warp. There we go. All right, lovely.
Okay, I'm gone, but thank you, Michael. That happens every now and then, as I am not an expert in broadcasting either, but I'm a fan of it, so I have a good time.
And you do a great job.
Anyway, I left off at bunting. How about base running? They ran the bases better than they do today.
They do.
They stole more. They were infinitely hit and runs don't even exist anymore in baseball. I can't remember seeing the last time I saw a hit and run play.
And dead ball was all about risk. It was risky.
They went from first to third all the time.
Oh yeah,
in dead ball.
Yeah, and you got to remember too. I mean, even for the reason it was called that ball would have been hard to hit. I mean, it was hit for distance by sluggers like Sam Crawford and Hannes Wagner, but it was, that ball. And by the end of a 9-inning game, was so misshapen and scuffed and, just crazy. And the size of the bats that they used too, because right back then they didn't have a clear understanding of baseball physics. So let's just take a guy who started in dead ball but then changed baseball history, Babe Ruth. Imagine if Babe Ruth had swung a bat the size of Ken Griffey Jr. right at that 43 or 44 ounce behemoth,
something like that.
Yeah. And so imagine how many more home runs Babe Ruth might have hit, or Josh Gibson for that matter, right?
The bats were much different, but they were more conducive to contact hitting than home runs. They didn't rely on bat speed as much as they do today. They wanted that big piece of wood so they could put the bat on the ball.
Right. Well, even you look at Ty Cobb's famous batting grip, right? So he had the hands apart. And so Cobb was so good that he could choke up and poke at the ball or move the upper hand down. Of course, he was a lefty batter, move that left hand down to swing for a bit more power. And in fact, famously hit, 2 home runs in a game. So yeah, home runs are easy, and went out and did it. This was, of course, in the live ball era, but yeah. Also, the tactics were different. The tactics were very different.
Everything was about scoring one run.
Yep.
They wanted if a runner got on base, it, today, if a runner gets on first, they sit back and wait for the next guy to hit a home run.
Mhm.
Today, in dead ball, a runner went on first. The object was to get him to second, and then the object was to get him to third,
Yep.
and then the object was to get him home. They didn't give a shit about the batter.
No, they didn't. And I think that's a really, really important point to really consider, that in my estimation, what would have made the game so fun to watch was the fact that there was so much risk. It's like, okay, how are you going to move the line? Right. So wisdom these days is, kind of like, I hate to lay this on the great Earl Weaver, but I kind of have to. The load them up, go for the grand slam type thing. And you could see that even in our lifetimes, or right, those of us who've looked at, like, say, 1970s baseball, for instance, that you would have this sense of, again, steals, especially in the American League. So the National League was still playing a faster kind of baseball even in the 1970s. But if you look at the American League, that was more of a power league. And of course, now they both are. And so, what have they had to do to reinstitute stealing? Limit pickoffs to first and make the bases larger. It's like, that's nonsense to me.
Oh, particularly the larger bases. I think that's the stupidest. That's right up there with the ghost runner, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The base is the same size for 170 years, and now you're going to make it bigger?
Yeah. To instill more excitement in the game. And so I'm just going to say what I've said so much, that baseball didn't have to do those things, and they didn't even have to go back to the dead ball era. They could have gone to 1970s baseball. You had speed, you had power, you had pitching. That was a great decade.
Yeah,
so
no question.
Yeah, and you didn't necessarily have cleanup hitters, but like you were talking about bunting earlier. When was the last time you saw a drag bunt? Like, not just a regular poke at the ball, but a drag bunt to try to really get on base, right, by somebody other. Well, now with the DH in both leagues, but you know what I'm saying? Like just that drag bunt, catch him off guard. What did Willie Keeler say? And you've already said this without quoting him, but hit him where they ain't.
Yeah, you look at when they did the shifts, all those shifts a couple of years back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why the guy at the plate didn't just lay a bunt down.
Exactly.
And
or why didn't Ted Williams just poke a little flare into left field in the 1946 World Series?
Well, yeah, that would have changed 46. There's some other differences I think are important. You just mentioned they don't rely on the home run. They certainly didn't, because they did. The only home runs they hit, the fields were so big. The fields was totally different.
Oh my God.
Outfields were larger. The fences were further back.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, except for Baker Bowl, dead ball parks were huge.
The outfields were so large they used to put overflow fans in the outfield and
in the dugouts.
But let's talk about the fielders for a minute. Those gloves if you put those gloves on today's defensive players, they wouldn't catch anything.
No, they wouldn't.
And if the fields were in the condition those baseball fields were in, that would make it even worse.
Well, I think that's one thing the movie 8 Men Out gets right. So if you guys watch it again, pay particular attention to the field and how dusty, and what kind of lawnmowers did you have back in those days? Let's say you're in 1919, right? Of course, back in the 19th century, they would actually put goats or sheep out in the fields to keep them clean. But yeah, these weren't manicured fields.
Or better yet, if the field was muddy, they poured gasoline on it and lit it on fire.
Yes, they did. Jeff makes a nice point here. He says, years ago, we had a tournament of teams that lost World Series by the slimmest possible margin. Game 7 by 1 run, or 8 of a contest ended a tie. The 1912 Giants won it all. They were a tough team, too. And he says, since this was in Strat, yes, dead ball teams are really that good. Yeah, Philip, you're right. No artificial turf back then. I think the other thing too is getting back, Bernie, to what you were touching on, is sort of the strategy, and I would say that not only strategy, but I think tactically. I would say dead ball was superior as a tactical game.
Well, it was different. I'm going to get to the superior and inferior thing in a minute, but I just want to talk about the differences, and nothing was more different than the pitchers had to pace themselves in dead ball baseball.
They
If
did.
you were a starter, they expected you to finish that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They weren't telling you just go out there and throw as hard as you can. We'll bring out the other pitchers. They didn't have any other pitchers.
No. I mean, even that concept that we have of sort of specialist relievers, that wasn't. I mean, if you would have said John McGraw, to me, the greatest baseball mind to ever, right, to manage a club, McGraw would have been what? What are you talking about? Expletive laced, of course. But yeah, so I mean, relievers came in, but they weren't. It wasn't in the way that we think about it. And you're right. So they carried smaller pitching staffs. And although we're not covering 19th century baseball, but even if you look at the advent of modern baseball in 1893, which is really the beginning of the dead ball era, you see those smaller pitching staffs, because it is about, okay, the pitcher, and not only paid for 9, but his job was, you got to keep the guys off on base, and these guys were going to do anything they could to get on base, which I think is a lot of fun. Also, and I'm not going to quote it here, we don't have time, but I've done it on some other broadcasts, is Johnny Evers and his in-depth, very, very scientific study of how much time and what a catcher would need to do to throw out a good base stealer at second. So another misconception about dead ball players, and I don't want to stray too far off the subject either, but about them is they were just a bunch of uneducated whatever. Well, maybe many of them didn't have college degrees, although quite a few did. Eddie Plank, Christy Mathewson, Rube Marquardt, Gavy Kravitz, and I'm just naming a handful. But all of them had great baseball minds, these players, and they understood the strategy and tactics. Yeah.
I was just going to say, you mentioned 1970s baseball. When I started the Red Sox historical tournament, which obviously was born out of Michael Silva's big bad baseball bash, which he's finishing up on YouTube. It picked. I asked ChatGPT what season and era for tactics should I put into OOTP when I play these cross-era games, and their response was that if the teams are separated by more than 30 years, the best year to use is 1975, because that year they used tactics of both dead ball and modern baseball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's funny you should mention 75. 70s baseball was still had dead ball elements of dead ball baseball in it. That's how long it lasted.
Absolutely. And you still had complete games in the 1970s. We could do a whole show on 1970s baseball, which is just great era. But I mean, you think of the great base stealers that you had in the 70s, and sluggers, and great pitchers. And so, there you go. But so much of that born out of the game's formative years. I mean, so we're focusing on dead ball, but a lot of what was happening in dead ball was already going on as far back as the advent of the National Association in 1871. Even
you mentioned Earl Weaver, who managed in the 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
There was no such thing as analytics in the 1970s, and if there was, they've kept it quiet. Managers still manage by feel and matchups and what their intuition told them and what they would see with their eyes in the 70s. That's how they managed in dead ball. They don't manage that way today. What you see with your eyes and what they don't, the front office does not care about how you feel about something or any hunch you may have. Mm-hmm. They give you the statistics, the analytical statistics, and tell you to manage the game that way.
It's weird. Mike's joining us. Hey, Mike. So, John McGraw, Mike, you're watching the Ken Burns documentary. So since you've been mentioning John McGraw, you also know that he fined a player for hitting a home run.
Yeah, instead of bunting.
To me, John McGraw is the greatest manager in baseball. And he managed in live ball. and in the Hall of Fame as a player and as a manager. To me, the greatest baseball mind, on field. John McGraw was brilliant. He really, really was, and he was fair. He never ever called out his players on physical errors, but mental lapses. McGraw he would come down on you like thunder and lightning. But Bernie, about the you were talking about, you wanted to get to the superior and all that. And I was just curious where you're going with that.
Well, I'll tell you. I got two more points I want to
Oh, sure,
talk
please.
about dead ball, and then we'll get to modern baseball, and I'll tell you how I think that's different anyway. In dead ball, the players were versatile. They could do everything. They could bunt, they could run, they could field, they could hit behind runners. They did everything. You take today's superstars, they can do almost none of that.
Right.
They can hit home runs.
They can hit home runs.
And they swing the bat as hard as they can. I also think the dead ball baseball rewarded intelligence and execution.
It did. And I want to throw in another thing. You're talking about hitters. Dwayne Martz said something, he said it quite a few times, when comparing pitchers of bygone eras to today. And he said, pitchers today throw. And I think he's right. There's that distinction. And you see that like with the great, starting with the dead ball pitchers, like Addie Joss and Mathewson and Walter Johnson. Again, to me, the greatest pitcher in baseball. These guys pitched. They understood the situation. And I'm not saying but today these guys are up there, and look, off-speed pitchers are now in the mid-90s. They're throwing gas even on off-speed stuff. There's no knuckleballers anymore. That I know of. There's no knuckleballers in the major leagues even.
I don't know one. It's different when you get to the modern teams. And I want to discuss them. I don't think they're better. I don't think dead ball was better. I just think they were they're so different. The game is just totally changed. Today, players are bigger, stronger, and in better condition.
Mm-hmm.
They eat better. They train better. They prepare year round to play baseball. These guys that played 100 years ago, they worked at a hotel front desk in the off season to make money to eat.
Mm-hmm.
They had no time to go work out, and if they did work out, they couldn't find a gym.
And they had to go fight wars too. I mean, Grover Cleveland Alexander was a private and was on the Western Front and came back shell shocked. So yeah, there's that too.
You just mentioned pitching. Pitching is totally different.
Yeah, no pitch counts, and Philip says he's right. Yeah, no pitch counts in dead ball. That would McGraw, Mack, all those guys. Bernie, they would have what? What are you talking about? Pitch count? He's paid for 9. He's going to pitch 9. Right?
That's even in the 1970s. Louis Tiant and Nolan Ryan used to go out and throw 180, 200 pitches in a start, and then 4 days later they'd come back again.
Yep.
That isn't. It's just different. Today they send out pitchers. I know on the Red Sox anyway. They say go throw the ball as hard as you can. I'll take you out some of those guys are taken out in the 3rd and 4th inning.
Oh yeah. I mean, the Pirate game today. So we swept the Twins, and Braxton Ashcraft. He's got a hell of an arm on him, right? 11 strikeouts, but they pulled him in the 7th. He didn't come out to pitch the 7th, and I'm like, you at that point, it was something like a 9-0 lead or 9-1 lead. It's like, let him pitch. You got a margin, but that's not. It's quality starts. And I think to the dead ball, and not just dead ball, but I think if you even go through the 70s, and I think starting even in the 80s, I think this idea of quality start would have been nonsense. Even to Earl Weaver, right? Earl Weaver didn't come out and pull Dave McNally in the 3rd or 4th.
No,
or Cuellar or anybody like that. His
pitchers
right?
pitch complete games all the time.
Yes, exactly. So your argument is that it's a difference. It's not a question.
It's a different
quality.
game. One isn't better than the other. I think in their time, all of these players are superior athletes.
Oh, absolutely.
Look at today's defensive game. You take a look at the gloves they use, the condition of the field they're in, the condition the players are. They make plays in the field today that they could never have made 100 years ago. It's just not possible.
Absolutely agree.
and of course, there's the analytics have changed the game. Managers no longer use their intuition. They have a cheat sheet that
Hmm.
tells them what to do, when, and how to do it. Uh, I think a manager's top job these days are keeping 25 millionaires happy in the same clubhouse.
And you know what? In that respect, their job's a lot harder than the job John McGraw had or Connie Mack had.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and plus the hitters today, you might face a guy throwing 95 to 100 miles an hour for the first 3 or 4 innings.
Hmm.
They take him out, then the next guy comes in and throws 102.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, you are not going to hit against tired pitchers. You're not going to hit against pitchers that are pacing themselves. It's just so different. And when dead ball teams might have 6 or 7 pitchers on a team, today's baseball team have 12, 13, 14 pitchers on a team. They're not going to run out of pitchers.
No.
They're going to keep coming out of the bullpen till they beat you. Injuries. How about injury? They don't play today with injuries. Nobody plays with injuries today.
There's a great story of Hannes Wagner getting spiked viciously, right? So everybody on the team comes into the infield, they call time, they're standing around, pull down his pants, they grab a bunch of tobacco, mud. This is a true story. Packed it into because these were spiked and they sharpened them, right? It wasn't the cleats. This was and finished the ball game, then went and got 29 stitches on his thigh. I mean, these were tough dudes that are coming out of the steel mills and the coal mines. And I'm not advocating that these guys should be pouring out blood like Wagner did or anybody, but it was a tougher game.
Yeah.
Baseball I always hold is the most difficult game, but it was also tougher in the dead ball era, physically tougher, violent even. It really was.
Some other changes with the modern game, video scouting.
Oh yeah.
They spend hours and hours today in front of video monitors and computers that analyze a pitcher's pitching. In other words, a batter today knows when he's up there, if he's facing a guy who's got an 0-2 account, he knows the exact pitch the guy's going to throw next.
Oh yeah.
Because computers have analyzed what he's done, and it will give you the percentages.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I'm bringing this up is not to compare the two. I'm bringing it up to just say it's all different. And of course, today, everyone worships the home run like you used to worship the bunt and hitting behind a runner and advancing the runners.
Yeah.
So in the end, I don't think dead ball teams are better at playing baseball. Or even though they're winning they seem to be winning in my sim, and I want to bring up sims with this in a minute.
Sure.
But to me, the dead ball teams are complete teams. They can do everything. Where modern teams are highly athletic individuals that are doing difficult things also, but they're not doing the small things. So they just play a different game. And that's what I wanted to talk about.
Well, I like that. Hey, welcome in, Mark. Great to see Mark Unger joining us here, Diamonds and Dice. It is in many ways a different game, but I would offer that still that the fundamentals of what you do in baseball, right? What's that great line in Bull Durham from the manager? You throw the ball, you hit the ball. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so those fundamentals, that hasn't changed since Mr. Cartwright laid down the rules.
No, but I'm going to tell you that in 1909, Ty Cobb would have bunted a player to another base.
Of course,
Today, pick whatever slugger you want to pick. They're not bunting anybody.
No. In fact, it was
they don't even know how to bunt.
No. Welcome in midlife. Well, yeah, they don't. Right. In fact, they also they talk about a lot of broken bats. What did we learn as a kid? Hit with the label up. Now I see guys up there when you see them swinging through the labels, broken bats all over the place. But the thing is you're right. You're not going to see that, and I think it would be so rare. Imagine a number 5 hitter bunting somebody over. It would make baseball headlines. It would be seismic. You would see it on all week. Oh, so blah blah blah. Number 5 hit for whomever, whatever. Again, name a slugger, bunted somebody over. That I mean, but yet in
It doesn't have,
1913, that would be like, well, that wouldn't even be a headline. That's what you're expected to do. Move the line. Move the
I
line.
would dare.
Right?
I remember when I played baseball in high school, which was
Mhm.
a long time ago, and we'd have practice before the season started.
Uh-huh.
They had bunting practice. They had everybody did. I guarantee you, the home run hitters today don't bunt in spring training ever,
No, I would,
because they're never going to be asked to bunt.
no. So Mark asked, he said, I'd be curious to know how many number 5 hitters bunted guys over in the 70s and 80s. So, I mean, certainly, I mean, I don't have any statistic, but I think that, Mark, but, especially with the 1970s, that you still, again, you, I don't know if you've been here since the beginning, but you had, as Bernie stated, and Bernie, I don't know if you wanted to repeat this about, with the study that you've done on it, but you still had the fundamental tactics of moving the line, but you also then you add in sluggers, and that, but you still had stealing, you still had all those other things, and I think that the 21st century baseball product, it almost makes me think like, if we were to take the beginning of the 20th century, so advent of the American League in 1901, and if we look at baseball, I'm beginning to think now that we're maybe doing ourselves as students of the history of the game a disservice by just making this sort of kind of demarcation between dead ball and live ball. I think that the game that's being played now is very different from the 1970s. Even it's a different baseball game. Yeah,
I know in my lifetime I've seen number 5, 6, 7 hitters that had a lot of power. I've seen managers during the 60s and 70s send up a guy who couldn't hit but knew how to bunt because they needed to get a runner in over the second base.
Yeah, get him into scoring
and
position.
They would pinch hit for the slugger.
Yep,
just to get the bunt down.
Oh yeah, yeah. Danny Murtaugh would do that a lot with Willie Stargell. I mean, Stargell struck out. He was a better average than Dave Kingman, but they were similar, and they're going to hit the ball a ton or they're going to strike out. But Danny Murtaugh, everything that I've studied about the lumber company Pirates in the 70s, that they would bunt for Stargell, and it would be usually somebody that could bunt or just could poke the ball, get it into play. Yeah.
So if we've sort of agreed that that dead ball or modern baseball, one group isn't better than the other, they're just different than the other.
Different. Yeah.
How can you determine in a tournament like I'm doing or a tournament like Mike Silva's doing, which is a better team, if you can't have one team play with dead ball rules and the other team play with modern rules? You have to pick something in the middle.
Right.
And even Action PC Baseball takes it and normalizes it by mixing it all together. You can't, if you have a 1908 team playing a 2010 team, the 2010 team can't play with modern era rules. They have to play with some mixed up group of rules that combine 1908 and 2010. I would say that in these baseball simulations, you should be 1908 should be able to play with 1908 tactics, and 2010 should be able to play with 2010 tactics, and it should be able to play against each other in the same game. You can't do that today.
Actually, in Action PC, you can do that. There is a way to do it.
Good. That's, like I said, I'm not an expert. Explain it to me.
So what you basically do is when you're setting up a cross-era league, you assign specific teams to a year. That's how you can do that, but it's something that I guess they don't really, they say, they want you to, when you're doing that, be aware that you're doing that. And if you look the next time at Action PC, and if you're setting up something like that and you're putting these teams in, you're going to see an asterisk on that thing, assign teams to year, and then are you sure? So, but you can do it. Now, I've never tried it.
Well, that's what I'm going to suggest.
I just normalized to a season. I've never tried yet actually assigning teams to a year in a cross era type project in Action PC. I've never tried it.
In one of your broadcasts coming up this week, when it's late at night and you sit down and you want to play a game,
Mhm.
you should set one up because I'd love to watch that game.
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, it sounds like fun.
Anyway, so
I think the other thing,
that's
Bertie, if you mentioned rules, could we just? I want to touch on that for a moment too, please.
sure.
So
I've been talking a lot. It's all yours. I don't really have much more to say. I've just spilt it all.
no, you haven't. I mean, it's fun because it's uncovering, more layers of the glass onion. Thank you, John Lennon, for that. But so with the rules now, right? So I haven't looked at the statistics to see since they put in the bullshit limited pickoffs to first and things like that, have stolen bases increased dramatically? I don't know, but if you were to take a team right now playing in 2026 with these rules, okay, now these guys came up through the system under the, they were still in the minors and pitchers could throw over to first all day, right? But fundamentally, how do we even make a meaningful comparison now in a game where you can have a runner in scoring position in extra innings and that runner didn't do anything to get on base? So
The dumbest rule in the history of baseball.
it really is that, and it's just one of the things, but right there fundamentally changes the game, I think. And what do I know? Again, I'm like you, I'm just a baseball fan, but I believe wholeheartedly that changes the game as profoundly as the introduction of the live ball in 1920. It really does.
Well, it changes the whole. It changes
And bases are bigger. Yes,
every.
Will. Yep.
It changes everything in baseball when you throw a ghost runner on. First off,
Mm-hmm.
I guess my first question would be, what's wrong with it ties? If they don't want to play extra inning games because they don't want to have expanded rosters, because they don't want to pay more major league salaries, because your minimum major league salary is like $750,000 or something.
Not a bad piece of coin.
So they don't want to. They don't want to increase the roster sizes to 28, so you have enough pitchers to do a extra inning game because you change them so often today, which is one of the fundamental changes we discussed earlier.
Right.
You don't want to do that. Just play 9 innings, and if they're tied, they're tied. We'll become a hockey league.
Or we'll do it. They do ties in Japan by necessity because of the transit system. I would hope it would never come to that. I mean, because, you would have ties in the dead ball era for obvious reasons, right? It got dark. But it's just, to me, the game has changed so fundamentally. And I'm not about, hey, get off my lawn. It's not that. Last year was, in my estimation, at least one of the greatest World Series ever played in any era of baseball. It was great. And what we saw Shohei Ohtani do was, I think, once in a lifetime. What he did, 10 strikeouts, 3 homers. Come on, in the same game. That's incredible. That was never done in, you didn't see that in the dead ball era. So, I mean, a lot of people say, oh, Beatles is just dead ball only. No, it's not. But if I can take a moment, I want to clarify it. But I'm not going to mention names. So there is a YouTuber here that has discounted, and he's a very prominent YouTuber that has completely discounted any baseball before the live ball era. He feels they were inferior athletes. He says that they wouldn't be a patch on today's players. They don't count. These guys were just carpenters and plumbers and ditch diggers that happened to play some baseball. And I think that is the most erroneous, inaccurate, ignorant thing that you can say. And so that's what sparked me to really, in the early days of my own little family, of which you're part of too, is to concentrate on that, because I've always believed that great athletes are great athletes. All right. So, Tris Speaker didn't have the conditioning and the understanding of kinesiology and all these things that these players have now. But I believe that talent is there, that if you would give somebody like Tris Speaker modern training, they still would be great. It would be almost like saying, well, if eras means something, that must mean somehow that Mozart sucked as a composer, right? Oh, well, we have John Lennon and Paul McCartney, so Mozart, he was back there in the 18th century. What did he know? Well, he knew a hell of a lot, and he was a great talent. In fact, talent is too that's an underestimation of Wolfgang, right? But
Mhm.
if you have that talent as a baseball player and you are good enough to make it onto the roster of one of 16 Major League Baseball clubs, because for at least 6 months out of the year you didn't have to work in the steel mills, you're going to play your ass off. And that's what they did, you know?
No question, no question that it's just the athletes of today are playing a different game,
They are.
and and I'm not so sure if you put in those athletes from 150 years ago, they wouldn't be as good as the guys are today. I think they would be.
Oh, I think they would be too. I mean, what was Babe Ruth's conditioning? Half dozen hot dogs and a couple beers. But and again, a big ass heavy bat. What was the All-Star game that they brought Hannes Wagner's and Babe Ruth's bats? And most of these, and I'm talking some of the big hitters that we have today, could barely lift those bats.
Oh
And
yeah, they
guys like
could never.
Wagner and Ruth were killing these. Were killing the dead ball. Yeah,
Yeah, no question. So I guess to answer the question, are they really that good? Yeah, the dead ball teams are really that good, and so are the teams today. They just play a different game.
they are. Now, if that being said, Bernie, with that being said, if I were to choose, and I'm going to take the 1970s out of the thing right now, out of the consideration, and knowing what I know about dead ball, and as much as I've read about dead ball baseball, and if I were given a choice where I want to watch today's games or games in 1908, it would be 1908, 365, 7 days a week.
There were more interesting games. You taught me
Oh
something
yeah.
early on. I don't know if you remember this conversation we had probably about 3 years ago when I started to do that first dead ball season with 1912. And the 1912 Red Sox, who I believe one of the greatest teams of all time, that team was not winning. It was playing like 500 baseball on behind,
Mm-hmm.
and they ran away with the season
Yes,
that
they
season.
did. They were dominant.
And they weren't winning. And about halfway through the season, in the conversation with you, I finally figured it out. I don't know if you remember this. I was managing 1912 Red Sox like I was managing the 2012 Red
I
Sox.
do remember that.
I was using modern tactics to play dead ball baseball, and they were losing.
Yeah, you can't do
Because
it.
I'm using modern tactics.
Yeah.
And I ruined one of the greatest teams in baseball because I did that. And that's when I started to manage like a dead ball manager.
But we
And
still love you. We
then
still love you,
dead
though.
ball, yeah. But then good dead ball teams played well when I
Mm-hmm.
started to manage that way. It's very interesting.
Well, it is that risk, and I want to point back to the McGreevy League where Ken Castro really did a masterclass down the stretch on how managing was done in the 19th century and the dead ball era. And Ken was doing some risky things, and it was paying off. And I would just say this is how it was played. No, I've never seen it. You've never seen it, but we have primary source material, right? You can go on the Internet Archive and you can read the Spalding baseball guides, and read those, and then even now today, if you look at sports magazines, how much do you even read about strategy and tactics in baseball articles? It's how far this guy hit this home run, or how many strikeouts this pitcher did, or whatever. But if you look at Spalding's baseball guide, I don't care, pick a year, 1907, 1902, whatever. There were really in-depth articles. Again, I feel people were a bit more literate in those days, even though they didn't have access to the accumulated knowledge of humanity. And you'd have Henry Chadwick, for instance, right, the inventor of the box score. And Chadwick, although interestingly, I'm going to talk about this at a broadcast some night, how Henry Chadwick wanted to change batting average. It was one of the things that he got wrong, and thank God baseball didn't implement it. But what you would find from Chadwick and from Spalding and other writers in the Spalding Baseball Guide were very deep explorations of the tactics and strategy of the game. And I think, ironically, that even though today, with all the spreadsheets and everything that managers have for their perusal at their disposal, that I truly feel that managers like John McGraw and like Connie Mack actually knew the game better. They really did. As you said earlier, right? Computers saying, well, in this situation, right? And you have all this information. There's no need for recall. Oh, well, so and so when the count's 3-2 and 2 on, this is going to be the best thing. Signal your pitcher to do this or what have you. McGraw and those guys didn't have that. They had to know the game. Their players had to know the game. And I think the fans, again, I never talked to anybody. I never knew anybody who was alive and adult in the dead ball era, but the things that I've read, newspaper articles. So if you're not a member of Saber, guys, you should join because you can find all this stuff.
Yeah, it's
Even
interesting.
Newspaper articles, you had this deeper sense of the game, and I think fans were better informed in many ways.
No
I
question.
do. No, I want to say
Mark Unger's asking a question that before we get too far away from what you're talking about pertains to what you're talking about. He wants you
Ken
to
would double steal with 2 outs.
Yeah, he wants you to elaborate on the risky things that he did.
You would see double steals with 2 outs. You would see a lot more suicide squeeze bunts, which again were more common in the 19th century in the dead ball era. I mean, they start to, double steals with 2 outs, they start to fade away pretty quickly. But early 20th century, you saw that, and Ken was playing that and understanding that it was all about risk. Every play.
And you were talking about the 1970s, I think midlife crisis a while back, said that in 1985, which is not quite the mid 70s, but Lance Parrish batted cleanup and had 3 sacrifice bunts.
Yeah.
So it was still there then, but it's not there now. I can tell you that.
I just want to dispel a myth. I get tagged as the dead ball guy. That's only because I'm until you started doing it, there was, David Baseball Demos would do every once in a while a little bit of dead ball. Then you started doing it, but I was doing it, and for a while I was kind of the only person in our little community that was visiting this era because somebody else honked me off. And it's like, I want these players to be remembered. I want them to know Zach Wheat and George Sisler, and Gavy Kravitz. And I'm not even, Sisler is a damned immortal. But I love baseball. But so my sort of knocking what I'm seeing today with the limited pickoffs to first, with the bigger bases, with outlawing the hard shift, I think is absolute nonsense. And so I just wanted to be clear that I didn't invoke dead ball to bring the game back to where it was. I invoked the 1970s. I think that was a perfect decade of baseball.
Well, I also think that baseball's not hurting today. The crowds are as big as ever. The television viewing is off the charts.
Yep.
The salaries are through the roof.
For now,
you have to be a billionaire to own a team.
Yes.
They're building a stadium here in Las Vegas, $2 billion. The stadium's going to seat 33,000 people.
Wow.
It's going to be hard to make $2 billion back with 33,000 seats.
I think you're right.
I can't imagine how much these seats are going to cost, but maybe today it's become maybe television. I know this is something different. Has television changed baseball?
Well, my thoughts on that, and so I'm going to compare a game that I don't like, but I think it's germane to this talking about television. Baseball is not a television sport. It really isn't. The field's too damn big, and most of the interactions happening between the pitcher and the hitter. But if you get somebody that's you want to turn them on to baseball, it's like, okay, hey, watch a game on TV. They're not seeing the subtle shifts, the subtle leaning that the infielders are doing, the things like that. right? That you have to see in a live game or you would hear from a great radio broadcast. Football is perfect for television because you've got those 22 guys right on that rate, and a football field is smaller, but you have the camera can be right there. Same with basketball, same with hockey because of the physical size of the playing space, right? But with baseball, you're it's a damn big field. And so I think that you miss many of the nuances, even in today's game, I dare say, of baseball. So but I do think that revenue has changed the game. Owners want to make more money. You've got to pay these salaries. You're talking about these ballparks. I mean, Bob Nutting finally invested in some players, and the Pirates are playing great baseball. But somebody's going to have to pay the piper, and that's we
Yeah,
fans.
I really haven't studied it, but I'm assuming television has changed baseball. I'll give you the perfect example. When I play a cards and dice or computer game and a play
Hmm.
occurs, I envision the play in my head, but I do not envision a television broadcast. I envision a radio call because
Oh yeah,
that's how I listened to baseball for years.
yep.
Because there weren't a lot of games on. The weekend games might have been on, but if you're going to follow a team Monday through Friday, you had to listen to them on the radio.
Oh, and I would much rather now listen to a baseball game than watch it on the telly, and that's absolutely. Now, when I make my move, I'm going to have to, change that up a bit. But baseball is best seen live for me, and on an audio medium, not necessarily visual.
Yeah, I just think that these announcers
Television.
were so descriptive. Today,
They had to be. They had to be,
today
right?
they're more entertainers telling jokes. They're not being descriptive. They're yelling if there's a good play, but they're not using adjectives to describe the play in most cases.
So, Mark, you're talking about dropping one down. So that real quick story about John McGraw, hitters up. I can't remember the name of the hitter right now. McGraw signaled for a bunt. Well, the pitcher grooved one, and pitcher knocked it into the stands. McGraw fined him $500. And he said, "But Mr. McGraw," McGraw said, "I said to bunt." So McGraw understood that. Yeah, I mean, the Giants won that game, but McGraw. I mean, there's no way McGraw would have known that the pitcher was going to groove the pitch. But as far as what they did to get on base, anything they could, anything they could. Sometimes it would be just that little poke to the opposite field. Sometimes a lot of infield hits you would see back, or I'm sorry, you would read about in the dead ball era, where guys were bunting not to sacrifice, but bunting for base hits.
Yeah, there were a lot of infield. The fielding in the infield today is so the infields are in such good shape and the
Oh,
gloves
they're
are so big.
beautiful. Yeah.
It's tough to get an infield hit if you've actually hit the ball. If you top it or don't hit it very well, it's possible.
Yeah.
But the ball would just as easy hit a rock in the infield back
Yeah.
in the dead ball era and bounce over someone's head. Believe it or not, this is such an exciting and I think invigorating conversation. We've already talked for almost 55 minutes, and my 1 hour rule.
I
Uh, so let's change up a little bit and try to come to some conclusions.
Okay.
So the first question I'm going to ask you: do you think dead ball teams are really that good? Why are they beating all the modern teams in my Sims?
Well, I guess I would answer your question by asking it, how do you have it set up in out of the park baseball?
Well, if they're within 30 years of one another, I split the difference.
Okay.
So if it's a 1910 team playing a 1920 team, I use the 1915 season as the strategy era. If they're over 30 years apart, I use 1975.
Okay. And welcome in, Eugene. And actually, so Eugene comes in at the right time. Have you done anything with manager profiles? Because out of the park baseball not only has all these profiles, including small ball, dead ball, whatever, but you can actually import the actual managers as well. Have you done anything with managers in your league, or are you just letting it play at default or whatever?
I'm letting it play at default. When I do a replay, I see that option when I go through the teams, but I'm using historical exhibition mode, and I don't think it gives you the option to do that.
Yeah, so that's one of the issues with historical exhibition mode that they or that Out of the Park, I think, needs to address. And I mean, this is important to the question you asked me, because it's kind of it's not the main game, but it's this really cool thing unto itself. But the problem with the tournament mode in Out of the Park baseball is it's not within the context of the season that those teams played, right? So
Correct.
like your 1912 Red Sox and your 1975 Red Sox are out of context. To really do something like this, but it would take forever, would be to actually have each team in a tournament play through a season, and then you would have that context, I think. But that said, it's fun. But do I think they're that good? I do. I still think they're really that good. I think there's I think there's this thing that we're only going to believe what we see. And people have
Yeah.
offered the argument, yeah, well, I've never seen Walter Johnson pitch, so how do I know he was that good? Stats,
Well, you know, I'm
newspaper
going to
accounts.
say,
Come on.
I'm going to say that not only were they really that good, I'm going to say if you play the dead ball style of baseball beats the modern style of baseball every day. Now, the modern style of baseball exists because the conditioning is better, and
Oh, sure.
we have more players, and the ball and the field and the glove, everything's changed.
And
However,
it might even be more efficient, right? You knock in 3 runs with a swing of the bat, right?
if automatically tomorrow everyone woke up with the current slate of major league teams and they started using dead ball tactics, I think the game would be better.
I think so too. But again, I'm also aware that
But that's not going to happen.
it's not going to happen.
That's just me dreaming.
Well, yeah, and I mean, my bias is toward that, because I liked that it was reading about it and how tactical it was. And Mark Unger mentioned something earlier, that the one thing that our sims cannot simulate, is that feel of the game then. And they really can't. I don't know, it would be possible maybe at some point to kind of have that more sophisticated kind of artificial intelligence, but we're not there yet.
Maybe we ought to get a game developer to do a mode or invent a mode of the game where we can do all that. As Midlife Crisis says, is the 1908 Cubs in the seasons he done has played with one of Steve Tate's rosters.
Yeah.
It killed the modern teams, and that's what I'm seeing that's exactly what I'm seeing in my games. Beatles, this has been a great conversation. We only got a couple of minutes left, and I'm going to give you the 2 minutes because this is your subject.
Well, again, I think that I would encourage you guys. I know that because I'm starting in 1908, I finally decided, okay, I'm going to give in, and we're going to do the greatest season in dead ball history and one of the greatest seasons in baseball, 1908. And I know that for a lot of people, a lot of these names are not going to be familiar. And so, but I would say give it a go, even in your own projects, and you're going to learn about these guys. But in the meantime, if you don't know the name, just think of it as you're going to see some AA ball, right? And this is like, oh, okay. Because you go to a AA game, or even a single A game, you don't know half the players, right? Think of it as that way, but I think what you're going to find is very rewarding. And if you're playing in the dead ball era in any of your projects, be risky, take chances if your game allows it.
By the way, Sports Time Machine wants more. I unfortunately, I've got something I got to do, so I don't have the time. But we can continue this in our June broadcast on your channel, Beatles. I can keep this subject going. This has been a really lively We've done a lot of shows together over the last couple of years. I think this one was one of the more mentally challenging ones to do, because you had to do. In my case, you had to do research. You had to look into what really is going on in a dead ball game and what's really going on in a modern baseball game.
Well, speaking as somebody who is mentally challenged, I agree.
By the way, I hope you guys that are watching that's a real picture of Beatles, by the way. If you've never seen, because Beatles never puts his face on the screen
Right.
in
If
any
you're
of
on
his podcasts.
Facebook, you will have seen that. But yeah, that is me.
I didn't ask him permission because I figured if he posted it on Facebook, it was in the public domain and I could
Public
use
domain,
it.
yeah. Yeah,
And
that's the yeah, so that's taken, so Bernie doing a little bit of work there with the Beatles shirt, but that's actually from a headshot that I'm going to be doing for my Magic website. So yeah, now you guys know what I look like. So I'm a degenerate. There
and
you go.
that's a real picture of me. I'm sorry I'm that old, but that's so,
Oh, listen to you.
I was doing my baseball podcast this morning. I do one every Sunday morning about So You Think You Know the Red Sox.
Great stuff. Great stuff, by the way.
I chronicle my 67 years as a Red Sox fan and tell whatever stories that I remember about each particular season. The reason I do it is because my father saw my father saw Babe Ruth play baseball.
Wow.
I know. Now, if my father was still alive, I'd talk to him for hours about what he remembers about Babe Ruth. What did he look like?
Goodness.
I didn't take advantage of that as a kid. And I'm doing this broadcast because either my children, grandchildren, or great-grandchildren, or any other ancestors that I may have will want to know what I saw with my eyes in 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s baseball. The stories will be there forever. That's why I do it.
And that's I love that you do it. And I mean, you know, I've told you, if one of the things I would love to do someday is catch a baseball game with you. But I really want to hear your tales about the Red Sox. I mean, you saw some of my, and even though I'm a Pirate fan, some of my baseball heroes are Boston Red Sox. Yep. And I want to know more about Tony C. And I want to even know more about the captain. I do. I mean, you saw Yaz play, man. You saw Tony. You
Tony C was my favorite ball player because he was the closest ball player in the 1960s to my age. He was born in 1945.
Yeah.
And when he came up as a 19-year-old kid, I thought, you know, I could be playing baseball with him right now. So
how cool is that?
It's exciting. By the way, one of my earliest memories of being a baseball fan, and then we're going to wrap this up because we're already over our hour, was a memory of the 1960 World Series. I can still see Mazeroski hit that home run on TV like it was yesterday. That's how exciting that was.
I often wonder if Tony Kubek still feels that ball in his throat that allowed that home run to happen.
Well, you got to remember, I was a baseball fan for a whole one season at this point.
Okay.
And I didn't know much about baseball, but I did know that the big, bad New York Yankees never lost.
Right.
And to have little Bill Mazeroski hit a home run, walk-off home run in the 7th game of the World Series, that solidified the fact that baseball was the game I wanted to watch
That's
and
beautiful.
follow.
That's beautiful.
All right. Do you see the screen? Do you want to thank people for coming in, or what do we want to do here to wrap this up?
Well, I mean, this is your house, but guys, thank you for just for me for being really lively in this discussion. And we're going to carry this into June, which should be really cool because I think it'll give you guys time to dig into some things, look at some things, and offer some counterpoint or what have you. So thank you. You guys are such an amazing community. You really are, all of you.
And we're going to thank specifically Mark Unger, Midlife Crisis, Sports Time Machine. Who else? I don't want to miss anybody here. Wait a second. We got more. I bet we have more as I keep scrolling. Philip came by earlier on. SGJ Jamie, one of my favorite people in our community. He writes the greatest stuff. I love reading his stuff. Jeffrey 1852 is in here. Michael Silva even stopped by. I guarantee you Michael's still not here, but Michael Silva stopped by to begin with. And the first one in the ballpark, so to speak, was Jeffrey 1852. I want to thank all you guys for coming by and listening to Beatles and I talk to one another, which is what this is all about. The Beatles and I used to have conversations.
He's still here. Michael's still here. He's still here.
Hey, I think that's great. Beatles and I used to have these conversations offline all the time, just the two of us,
Mhm.
and I thought they were so interesting. My idea for this podcast was Beatles. Let's go on for an hour once a month. We won't make it a job. We'll just make it fun, and we'll have these conversations on YouTube. And I appreciate the time Beatles has spent with me online, and he's hard to nail down. But when you nail him down, you get good stuff.
Dude, you're my partner in crime. That's what it's about.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We're going to sign off here as soon as I find out where the buttons are. They're always hiding behind something on my computer. Anyway, have a nice Sunday evening, everybody. Talk to you later.